You are listening to Ras Temari Radio, Offense Necessary, where we discuss everything but politics. We're here with our new guest, latest guest,
Maranatha.
Maranatha. Thanks for being on here, man.
Anytime.
We appreciate having you on. So, as we start all of our episodes, including now that we have video element, additionally, hello everyone. As we start all of our episodes, what is something that you've taught yourself recently that you'd like to impart to us?
Recently, life in Addis has become so hard nowadays, and it taught me that to rely on myself more than I do on anybody.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and that people are expendable. I'm getting to that point in my life where I'm like, if somebody doesn't want to work or manami, just let them go.
Yeah.
Move on.
As far as somebody who you partner with or somebody, I've dealt with that quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
Anyone doing entrepreneurship, I think that's one of the lessons is things in Addis have gotten to that point. Where I think that might be a product of the economy or the wage situation or the virus. A lot of things have created the fact that everybody, it's kind of every man for themselves.
Yeah.
More and more and more, and plus there's the political situation, the war, etc.
Exactly.
But yeah, as far as entrepreneurship, you feel that way, that more so now than before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because you've been you're one of the co-owners along with your wife of Shifta.
Yeah.
Which is a restaurant, has cultural events and so on.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that business or business in general?
So Shifta was established back in January 2019. We started in a small spot behind Shakar building, yeah. So we were there for like 2 years, and then it got to a point where we had to expand, or else we were gonna die.
Yeah, that was a very small place, but it was well known.
Yeah,
it was well known. It was a fun place for people to gather. It was very unique.
Yeah, it was very memorable. I miss that place.
Yeah, I miss it too. I only was there probably half a dozen times. I'm not even as. Yeah. No, but so in these 3 years, you've noticed this shift.
Yeah.
You've noticed that things have gone more and more to a direction where every person for themselves, people are less and less reliable.
Yeah,
and
people are ruthless nowadays.
Yeah. I've noticed that in setting this whole thing up as well, and it's part of. I mean, one of the themes we talk about on the show is this country is still, and we forget about it. I mean, there's a lot of forgetfulness of the fact that. Over about 30 years ago, it was a socialist country.
Yeah.
And, no liberalism, no free market, very few businesses, very few. But also the other side of that is that there's more communal institutions, more social solidarity, less crime, less divisiveness, less violence, and now more and more we're moving in this direction that I think comes with capitalism. And what do you think that comes with?
To be honest, I don't know. It's a combination of many things.
Yeah.
Part of it is, I think, Ethiopians used to be very honorable. Honor was the main basis for how we operate.
Right.
And I think we're losing more and more of that. And with that comes, all these things that you hear about on the news and everything. The crimes, all that. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because in the old days, your word is your bond,
Right.
Nowadays, it's whatever.
Yeah.
You can't trust anybody.
Yeah, some people would say there's an economic aspect to that too. Like maybe honor comes from the old school, the feudal society, the socialist society.
Exactly.
I mean, these things are all, I guess, tied together in some way. But yeah, you're right. There is a sense, like, we use the expression yeduroso. Yeduroso. Even old people use the expression yeduroso, like the people, even the generation before us, who are now mostly gone. Oh man, they were such honorable people, such decency. But I also think we, people of a certain class background or of a certain exposure are often working with and are dealing with other people of that same background. And like, I find, and I don't mean to, condescendingly talk about like poorer people or whatever, uneducated people, like there's some kind of godly, servile character. But like, I find that often people who are made to work hard and who come from not much, generally still have some of that principle or some of that, you know what I mean, and more religious and a little bit more, you know what I mean, tied to that honor thing. Is that fair to say?
I can't say.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
Yeah. Because you also deal with employees and so on, people of a different background.
Yeah.
And not necessarily much more reliable.
Yes, that's part of the thing that drives me crazy nowadays.
Right.
Like unreliable employees, they don't show up today, or they leave without giving you a warning, or
right.
It goes on and on.
Yeah, the whole thing crumbles if
exactly
something like that is not available.
Yeah, when we first started, we would panic when something like that happens.
Yeah,
it was just a regular Tuesday. We just make some calls and find somebody else, and then try and work with them as long as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny how, I mean, I notice that usually every couple of days I see something crazy, like more unreasonable, more bizarre than I had ever seen before, and it's just like getting worse. Like I have a family member who grew up here, who left for like 30 years ago. Every time she comes back, she's like, it's getting worse. Like people are getting more and more. So I went to a very fancy restaurant recently. It was yesterday. Yeah. I went to a very fancy restaurant. I won't call out the restaurant, but I go there and I'm sitting around waiting for like half an hour. Where's the waiter? Where's the waiter? And then finally I walk around and look for finally the waiter comes in. I'm like, where were you? He was like, oh, I went to have lunch. I'm like, and it's like our lunch hour, and I'm like, oh yeah, so there's no way to deal with this other than sarcasm, you know, and see whether or not he picks up. And he didn't. I was like, so a gut, like, was it good? Like you had a nice lunch. Oh yeah, he was like, yeah, it was real tasty. I'm like, that's great. I'll be sitting over there whenever you want to come around to do your job. Like, you know, I guess they're supposed to be working on shifts, right? So it is funny the lack of reliability.
It is.
Yeah, but hopefully we're heading toward the tipping point where at some point everybody's going to get fed up and there's going to be something that's going to change, that's going to force people.
I don't think that's going to be anytime soon.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. One can always hope.
Yeah.
For those of us who have committed ourselves to being in this country, there's not much else we could do. Yeah. So you also, in addition to being an entrepreneur, you also work in film and as a creative director, you said?
Yes.
And also you have a label.
Yeah, we started a record label about 4 months ago, but we officially launched it a couple weeks ago. Under the label, we have a few artists, Kasmasa being one of them. That's one of the success stories.
Absolutely, yeah.
We also have a few other artists that we're working with, and soon we'll be pumping out more and more projects. Yeah. Ultimate goal is to have quality music that we can export, like replicate the 60s era, the golden age of music from Ethiopia. Yeah.
So it's specifically Ethiopian music, because Kasmasan has some foreign influence as well, right?
Kasmasa is more hip hop.
Yeah.
But he coined this term called Ansar, which is the genre of what he's trying to do. But other artists have different styles of music and different genres that I'm working on. Yeah. Me myself, I'm mostly a hip hop head, so I have an ear for hip hop music. Yeah. But I like all types of black music.
Yeah, it's funny. It was only a few years ago. I remember. You remember when Sammy Dan and Cully Buds had a show with Lidge Mike over there, and I had heard about Lidge Mike, but you know, to me, I'm hard crap. I'd always laugh about it. You know, up until maybe 5-6 years ago. I went to a show and I saw everybody rapping along to his lyrics, and I saw his whole vibe, and I was like, this is a legitimate hip hop artist, and doing in Amharic, you know, which for many years people would try, but everybody just thought was kind of a joke. And it's just exploded. This is probably 3-4 years ago. That show. You know,
hip hop in Ethiopia has been pretty rough. I would say Lidge Mikael was the first successful rapper that broke boundaries and opened the door up for a lot of Ethiopian rappers.
He's a talented guy. I mean, he's a good performer. I find him.
I haven't seen him live. Yeah. But he's good.
He's very confident on stage. But it's funny because it took, so we're talking 20-something years for somebody to really do a legit hip hop. Right now there's Cosmos and there's others, but I mean, I remember, in the 90s hip hop was huge here from an audience standpoint, like American hip hop. There was a time. Were you here in the 90s? You've been here. and you're, I think, about my age. So there were clubs. I wasn't there for this because I was too young to go to these clubs, but I have it on pretty good record. There were these little niche clubs back in the 90s in Addis Ababa where people would get into fights, like brawls, over allegiance to West Coast versus East Coast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There was it was a more contained thing. It was more like a culty kind of thing. But there was always like legions of hip hop fans stashed away in Addis Ababa, and we couldn't quite. I remember in the diaspora the first time people were going out there and trying to do freestyle or rapping in Amharic or Tigrinya or whatever, and it was like, yeah, okay, this is nice, but it wasn't quite, for a long time.
Yeah. I remember the whole East Coast West Coast beef. Back in high school, we were big Tupac fans, so anybody that comes up to you and be like, Biggie's the best rapper, we would throw a fit or whatever. Never get in fights, but we would represent West Coast. But thinking back to it now, it's pretty dumb. Being so involved in something that's so far away. Yeah. But the art is art,
I mean, it was dumb for them even. Like even for them, it was dumb that people were going to be killed over allegiance to a coast or to whatever.
Yeah.
But for us to care that much,
I know. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Words are powerful, man.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. They kept inviting. I mean, Biggie Smalls had an album called "Ready to Die."
Exactly.
That was his big album. And then the next one that was released after he died was
Live
After Death, right?
And then he died.
And Tupac, how many times they talk about dying and this and that.
Yeah, I know. Eventually they call for it, I guess.
Yeah. But it's also, what I always think about with those guys, I was a kid. I mean, you were a kid when that happened.
Yeah.
I was like 10 years old, 11 years old.
Yeah, me too.
And, at the time, to me, a 25-year-old, a 24-year-old is a grown-up, is an old man. Especially, they have a way of depicting black men on American television, either as like a baby, like a little infant, or as a big scary man with no humanity, they don't point out the fact that they're kids, right? Like, Tupac and Biggie were 25 and 24, and it was once I got to that age that I realized how young they were, and then everybody was really unfair to them. That was like, oh, how stupid are they? They, the big, what I mean? Like, they didn't have the example of other people like them before that, and I mean, there was money in it, there was fame in it, there was a legend in glorifying yourself like that. Yeah. 25, 24 years old, like, you can make mistakes that you don't normally have to pay with your life,
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's very sad.
Is the hip hop thing here tied to the gang, any kind of gang or stylized violence or anything like that?
Not at all.
It's purely artistic.
It's purely artistic. I've never heard anybody getting shot over his lyrics or whatever.
What about having lyrics that talk about, even if they don't mean it, talk about stylized violence in one way or another, or glorify it?
Yeah, some rappers might do that because that's what they see, that's what they're inspired by. But I never heard it getting to a point of violence.
Yeah. Because that's another thing that's changed. We talked about the rise in crime in recent years. I mean, Addis Ababa, I remember a time when someone would get murdered, and for the next 6 months, everybody would talk about it. It's like, oh, that neighbor, that one guy died,
Yeah.
And now it's like, you hear about homicides or murders that it just happens to be somebody you know or somebody you're close with. Yeah. And like, otherwise you wouldn't have heard of it. That didn't used to be the case.
Yeah.
It used to be the case if somebody got killed, it was like the talk of the town.
Yeah.
Now it's happened so often that unless you had some reason to know,
I know. Even robberies is getting ridiculous nowadays.
Oh, I mean, forget about that. Yeah. Forget about that.
Yeah.
So you have this label that you're doing.
Yep.
You have the creative directing, so that's more in terms of marketing, advertising, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so now I used to work in an agency, so we would do creative directing for big corporations and companies and FMCG moving companies and all that. But I got tired of it, so I branched out and started doing freelancing. Then I got into music because I love music. So that's how I stumbled upon Cosmos and then the whole record label thing.
You sort of discovered Cosmos. Yeah. That must be, I mean, that's a huge contribution to the arts in Ethiopia, is to have somebody who, in a year, I mean, year and a half, I think, since
not even a half.
About a year.
Yeah.
He made quite a name for himself, and
yep.
I thought about. I think I mentioned to you before we went on that there's some obvious similarities to what's going on. There's no real right word for it, but more hippie or more artistic kind of hip hop. Better even than the old conscious rappers, but like Childish Gambino, Kendrick, people who are more artistic or sort of rooted in some historical thing. I don't know exactly what the term is, but yeah, he really feels he has that feel to him.
Yeah. His music leans towards more of the conscious rappers that you mentioned, like Kendrick and J. Cole, and those are some of his biggest influences.
Yeah.
So when he does his music, he tends to lean towards that style of rapping and stuff. Yeah. Which I like. I love those artists. That's what I want to replicate. Especially the 90s era with De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest, and we vibe in the same way with those artists.
Yeah, those guys. Those guys really emerged. I mean, you're right. They're known for their 90s stuff. They emerged that there was a period they called the golden era, the late 80s. De La and Public Enemy and EPMD, and when suddenly people for the first time thought. Because at first, when people hear rap, they're like, "What are they talking?" And it also wasn't very good in the '80s. But in the late '80s, suddenly it was like, "Oh, this is very artsy. This is very interesting. It's very conscious. Good vibes." And then there was kind of like a dip on the East Coast when it was really the West Coast that was driving things.
Yeah, gangsta rap came about. And
yeah. And then in the mid '90s, my favorite stuff, what I really consider the golden age, is that mid '90s New York stuff. And there's still artists 25 years later who we still revere, who came out then, Jay-Z and Nas and the Fugees and Wu-Tang and all that stuff. They all released their first albums in that era. And I don't think we'll ever see an era like that again. Yeah, Busta Rhymes.
Yeah, so 95 to 96, it was my favorite era from hip-hop.
Yeah.
Right around the time those artists came out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Right around the time and right at the end of the Biggie and Pac era. And I mean, there's something to the music. I always think people forget that rap is about music, primarily. It's great to have a great lyricist. I like listening to great lyricists, but I want to read poetry. I can always read poetry. I can always listen to battle rap if I really just care about the lyrics. Most people, it's really about the production, right? And that's most people jam along to the song and aren't really paying attention to what the guy's saying anyway. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a sort of like a filmic soundtrack quality, like a gangster film kind of quality. Even the lyrics are kind of have that gangster film.
Yeah.
But that like driving kind of 90s New York, like you remember Mobb Deep?
Yeah.
Remember Mobb Deep? Like that feel like you're listening to the soundtrack to some black gangster story kind of thing set in Brooklyn or Queens or something like that. And some people have brought that back kind of as but that's very much rooted in that mid 90s era.
Yeah. So somebody yesterday told me that Addis, the state of Addis and the arts right now reminds them of what was happening back in the 90s in the States and Canada and all that stuff. Because there's a big hip hop movement happening right now. There's a graffiti going on all over Addis, and then there's the skaters that are, doing big things with the skate community and all that stuff. So it kind of reminded him of the '90s era of America.
Yeah, especially places like New York and LA, right, where there's specific strife going on. The riots, the race riots in LA, the Rodney King thing, the Bloods and the Crips, that whole thing heated up. Some people think that's why Tupac got killed, because he got mixed up in that. And then in New York, I mean, is the era, so New York, I lived in New York when I was a small child, and then I went back and lived in Jersey in the early 2000s. It's a completely different city by then. Completely different city, totally gentrified. Some people think that's a good thing, but it kind of disperses all these communities to the edges. And Marawi Gerima? He's doing a film, or he did a film recently, his first film, I think.
Yeah, I saw that.
I didn't get a chance to see it, but it's about gentrification in D.C., which is where he grew up. But it's the same thing that happens in New York.
Yeah, I saw that. It's called Residue. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I really like his whole approach towards gentrification issue.
Yeah, I have to see that because it's entire communities get destroyed and nobody talks about it. The what this person observed, I think, is probably right. That there's a sense of artistic or cultural creativity happening, but a lot of that has to do with we're dealing with ethnic conflict. We're dealing with political changes. We're dealing with being at odds with the United States politically. We're dealing with there's also coronavirus. There's the economic situation. There's a sort of what we talked about earlier. It ran for himself, and sometimes the silver lining, so to speak, is that this is where artistic. It came from New York, from the outer boroughs. Hip hop started in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and it was actually as its direct roots, the story about the Jamaican guy.
DJ Kool Herc.
DJ Kool Herc, 71, so 50 years ago, last year, brought his boombox and his techniques, that they were using in dancehall music, including the breakbeat and all that stuff, all that inventiveness, brings it to the Bronx, and then you have, all this other stuff that happened. It was supposed to be a peace movement. That was what Afrika Bambaataa wanted. Then that got perverted. But, you had that, and then in the 80s you had the crack epidemic. And a lot of these artists that came up in the 90s, like Jay-Z, are talking about their experience growing up in the crack epidemic and how that perverted everything. But, the South Bronx is still probably one of the 3 or 4 most socioeconomically degraded places. No matter how gentrified the rest of New York is, I lived nearby the South Bronx in Harlem, just a couple of trains. I used to, actually, there's an Ethiopian Orthodox church is at the end of the D line. They moved from Abyssinian Church, which was in Riverside Church. So that's where I grew up going to. Okay. And then while I was in New York before I came here, in 2014, they moved to the end of I think it's the D line. So it's in the South Bronx. And you just see it. You feel it. Like, the Bronx is still the one place, the South Bronx specifically, where it's like a lot of black and Hispanic and super ghetto. I mean, super, super, super ghetto. And it's not random that's where, Kool. That's also where KRS-One is from. That's where Fat Joe and Big Pun are from. Some of the best artists I find are
from Bronx.
Specifically that South Bronx area.
The whole of New York has pretty decent rappers. All of the boroughs have, like, if you say Staten Island, you have like the Wu-Tang that came out of there. I think Beastie Boys came out of there too. I think they're from Staten Island.
I think they're from Brooklyn. For some reason.
Are you sure?
Because they have that song "Don't Sleep Till Brooklyn," right?
I think they're from.
They're from Staten Island. Huh. That's interesting. But there are so many great rappers from New York, but I can't think of one really great one in the last 20 years. Maybe like 15. A$AP Rocky, French Montana.
Okay.
Who else is from New York? Troy Ave, Papoose. I kind of like Papoose.
Papoose, yeah, but does he have an album? He's like a good freestyler.
He just mostly freestyle, but he's really good.
Yeah, he's good.
I just like listening to him.
Regardless, he's good.
But I can't think of. That's exactly my point. Can you think of like somebody on the level of a Jay-Z, a Nas, a Biggie?
From New York.
From New York in the last. They're all from New York, but in the more recent years. 50 Cent, and that's more than 20 years.
50 Cent is more than 20 years.
Yeah, it's more than 20 years.
I used to be into Flatbush Zombies back in 5-6 years ago.
I'm not familiar.
They were pretty good.
As in Flatbush, Brooklyn?
Zombie, yeah. They're called Flatbush Zombies, 3 of them. 3 rappers in a group. They were really nice. They had some good stuff going on.
Yeah.
Other than that, the whole A$AP clique, I think, is pretty close to.
Do you think that it's fair to say that if it is true, as I noticed, and I think you might feel the same way, that there isn't much going on in New York now, at least not compared to the 90s, that has probably something to do with gentrification.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, like,
it's not hard to believe.
When everybody in the city is either a millionaire or homeless, and on top of that, corporate takeovers, Times Square used to be, Times Square when I was a kid, some of these places, that was where there were hookers and porn shops and blue vials everywhere, drugs. I'm not saying it's a good thing, don't get me wrong. I'm not glorifying it, but you know what I mean? for it to change, it was one thing, yes, clean up everything, I agree.
Yeah.
But for it to change so radically that it became, MTV and Disney and Swatch watch stores, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, it's like a joke how much New York changed in that way.
But I think hip hop has a lot to do with the gentrification as well, because hip hop really brought a culture to the rest of America and the world, actually, that this is the it thing, So white people just wanted a piece of it, and they just gravitated towards it, I think.
That's true, and of course I remember being a kid noticing, Eminem came out. Okay, Eminem's good. Even Eminem hated, or at least he claimed that he hated, the fact that all of a sudden he has that line, and then a million other rappers emerge, other white rappers emerge, and it's like, there was that Bubba Sparks guy who was like the country white guy.
Oh, damn. But he's from Atlanta, though.
Oh, yeah, well, he was doing that, I'm country. Yeah. His name was Bubba. Right? There were those two Insane Clown Posse guys who immediately got into a feud with Eminem.
Yeah.
There was the other guy from the House of Pain who had been around before, Everlast.
Yeah.
Who reinvented himself as like a blues guitar player.
Yeah.
And he also got into a thing with Eminem. There was Kid Rock, who was doing like the rock rap thing.
Yeah.
There was Fred Durst doing the rock rap, but in a band context.
Oh, yeah, Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, with the DJ who had come over, DJ Lethal from House of Pain.
Yeah.
There was several others I'm forgetting now. I mean, when for years it was the BCs, and then suddenly, there's actually a market for for someone like Eminem. I mean, he was a talented guy, don't get me wrong, but it was selling like incredible, and it was like, this is happening again. When it happened with now, it didn't really happen, but once white artists come in, once people start really influencing the suburbs, but at the same time, a lot of the early commercial appeal was suburban white kids interested in like what's going on in the inner city and trying to mimic, NWA or so.
Yeah. But coming back to your question about a rapper from New York that came out, a good rapper from New York that came out within the past 20 years, I just thought of Joey Badass. I really like.
You like him that much?
Especially
he's good. Yeah.
His first couple albums were nice.
Yeah, I should listen to him more. But
1999 is one of the best mixtapes.
1991.
1999.
1999.
Is one of the best mixtapes. And Summer Nights. Those two are like.
Oh yeah, I'll have to listen to them.
Every track is amazing.
I love Azalea Banks had that one song called 212. You remember that song?
Yeah.
That was like brilliant.
Yeah, she had a fire album.
Yeah, I mean, I went and listened to the other songs and like, she's okay, but that one song had so much promise, and then I was like, oh no, is she gonna be like a one-hit wonder kind of thing? Because it was just so good, and then and then.
No, that album was fire.
Okay.
No, the tracks are amazing.
What's the album called? The whole album?
I forgot.
Yeah.
But she only had one decent album after that.
Yeah, it felt like, I don't know. I mean, there's Nicki. Speaking of female rappers from New York, there's Nicki. You don't like Nicki?
No.
You're not a fan of Nicki?
Nicki Minaj? Hell no.
You don't even think she's like talented?
I mean, the numbers say she is, but
you're not a fan. Okay.
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I mean, she with her, it was like the style, the influence that she had. I don't think anybody, maybe Kanye, like during that period had that kind of influence where women were doing the whole wig thing, black women, all of the, I mean, obviously she had surgery done or implantation, and there was a whole everybody trying to be like Nicki. For a while, and but I think it was more that than the music.
I would credit Lil' Kim more than I would Nicki Minaj for that whole female empowerment movement, because she started that whole thing in my opinion.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
She's also really good.
Yeah,
she's really good.
She was rapping next to Biggie, and she was like on par with his own.
Holding her own. Yeah.
Exactly. She was writing her own lyrics and everything, so she was awesome.
Yeah. Big fan. Yeah, people forget her when it comes to the great female rappers. Because usually you hear Lauryn Hill, and then there's Nicki, right? And people forget.
Lauryn Hill was more on the conscious side, whereas Lil' Kim was trying to do the whole sexual empowerment for females, saying whatever she wanted to say, and it was okay, giving women a voice. Yeah.
And Lauren was one of the. I mean, Lauren is a suburbanite. I lived in the same town that Lauren.
Oh, really?
Years after she was there. Okay. But she went to Columbia High in South Orange. She was there with Zach Braff. Do you know Zach Braff, the actor? You remember the show Scrubs?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that guy. They know each other in high school. Like, she went to his bar mitzvah or whatever. So he talks about this on the radio. He's like, he's being a condescending white person, but he's like, she was so articulate, blah, 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 blah. And then years later, I heard her being like, yeah, I'm from Newark. Well, then he's like, Lauren. In other words, she's one of those people who's from what we were talking about before. And there's a parallel with Ethiopia, I think. Because everybody kind of wants to be like Addis Ababa, like in the outskirts. We don't have the concept of suburbs here, not quite. But in the rural areas, especially near Addis Ababa, the way people are dressing, I've noticed it in the couple times I've been out to the rural areas in recent years that suddenly there isn't that big of a difference as there always used to be between urban and rural. Suddenly rural people are starting to catch up in the way they dress and the way but a lot of it is trying to be Addis Ababa, right? And so it's that same dynamic, I think, of like the city is the cool place. Like let's all pretend or let's all try to attach ourselves.
Yeah. But I think that's the case with every country, no?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think so.
There's not much glory in being a farmer.
No.
Unless you're in the city, then you glorify.
Yeah.
Do you remember that song? What was that woman sing? She had a beautiful voice. That's when you're the one that goes, baby. You remember that one? It's the one that goes, you remember that one?
I don't remember.
You know, I mean, I hear a lot of like older Ethiopian singers talking about the greatness of. That song was it was a big hit back in the day, but about a woman being like, I just want to go out into the rural areas, like it's so peaceful out in the countryside, and I'm tired of the stress of the city. So there's a glorification. Both sides kind of yearn for the romanticism.
Yeah, but farm is where to be, man.
You feel that way?
Yeah.
Do you plan on going out into the?
If I make enough money, buy little acres of land and have a little farm with my family, nice little house by the lake or something. That's the life.
When you say farm, you mean like real gatar, or you mean like kind of like Dabrazait, Mojo kind of thing?
No, gatar, away from people.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, different strokes for different folks. Yeah, I don't think I could handle being that far removed from. I'm just not used to it.
I just love nature, man. Any chance I get, I would love to delve myself in natural things.
It shouldn't be impossible to do. I mean, you start a farm. Go out there and.
But being from the city, you have like these certain amenities and things that you're used to. So it's kind of hard to detach yourself from that, like suddenly.
That's how I feel. That's why I couldn't. I mean, yeah, of course, I love nature too. It is beautiful. It is peaceful. But that's exactly what I mean. Like, I couldn't live in the rural areas. Not for long.
I would, but I need like a ton of money.
Right.
Yeah, have a little solar thing on the rooftop. So I have electricity all around, internet, and you need a bit of cash to do that, no?
And maybe you can come back and forth at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, these days, I know people who went out to Dabrazait maybe 15, 20 years ago, and that was the idea. Is like I'm out, and Dabrazait wasn't really much of a city.
I know.
It was a rest stop on the highway, and on some level, so was Adama, right? A little bit more of a city, but still, Dabrazait wasn't what Dabrazait is now. And it's beautiful out there, the lake and all that. But the idea was a retirement home out in the country or whatever. And now it's
it's becoming congested.
I mean, you're basically living in Dabrazait is a suburb, and I don't know. At this rate, 20 years from now, Dabrazait is going to be the center of Addis Ababa.
Exactly. They might even move the capital to Dabrazait.
Yeah, it wouldn't. It's probably too late to move the capital to Dabrazait because it's going to be swallowed up pretty soon. I mean, we saw this with airports and other ports. You know how the development of Addis Ababa, it gets pulled in the direction of when Legahar was established. Suddenly, the center of the city gets pulled towards the Legahar old airport. Some of the nicer houses, whatever, are pulled towards the old airport. Bole was established like most airports for safety reasons outside of the city, right?
Yeah.
But I had a relative who was who had a house out in like Bambis, you know, like close to Kazanchis. People are like, what's he doing like out in the forest?
Exactly.
This is like in the 50s, right? Like, what's he doing out in the forest, which is, you know, like a 2-minute walk from Addis Ababa. But like, that's how small and mostly to the west and the north Addis Ababa was. So now, I mean, Bode is pretty much the center of the city.
Exactly.
Not even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It happens so quickly.
I know. This city is like 140 years old. And it started in the north, like around Shiromeda. That was the center of. That used to be this, and Piazza was like Bole.
Right. Piazza was for people our parents' age. I think Piazza was, no pun intended, the place. Right? Piazza was like the only. Like if you were young, you wanted to hang out. You wanted to go get a cup of coffee and watch. You know, Sit on Bait, the first theaters were out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I still love Piazza for that. Like I feel like
too.
a very strong connection to the past in those parts of town. I would love. That's the one. If I were to live somewhere other than Bode or the center of the city now, you know, I would love to. If I could get like a nice. But the one place I kind of aspire to living is Piazza.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you feel the same way. Yeah, there's just something about it.
Yeah.
And also, there's the further north you go, to the origins of the town, the less congestion there is. There's traffic, there's less crime there is. The more you still have those old solidarity-based,
values and stuff.
Yeah, up towards Shiromeda, towards... I only go there as a U.S. citizen because that's where the U.S. is. But like, Shiromeda is like going to Antoto or someplace. Like, you know what I mean? It's really far out. But yeah, no, I appreciate the northern stretch of the town. So we covered some ground here. But you're also a filmmaker.
Yes.
And you've done documentaries, you said, and shorts and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I went to film school back in 2011. Film school called Luna Film Academy. There I was always into movies. My dad used to have a film store where we rented out movies. So we would have like VHS tapes at the house, like thousands of them.
That's awesome.
So all day on my breaks, that's what I would do: watch movies, record films, and then I kind of gravitated towards the directing aspect of it. As the more I learned about what filmmaking is, I really loved the director's role in filmmaking. So I wanted to be a filmmaker, but there was no industry, per se, back then. So I went to business school when I went, tried to do a couple things, and then I was like, whatever, I have to follow my passion. So I went to film school, studied directing and script writing, and then I joined an ad agency called ZA1, where I worked for like 5 years. There I started making commercials and documentaries and so on and so forth. So after they saw that I was a good filmmaker, they also knew I had a background in business. They kind of bumped me up to creative directing, and then I learned what creative directing is, and I really love the process of turning an idea into something, tangible.
That is great, isn't it?
Yeah, the whole process.
See it happen.
Yeah, exactly. The whole process is amazing to me. Yeah, so that's how I kind of.
And then you left advertising to go into more your own artistic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your different.
Filmmaking is super hard, especially in Ethiopia where there's no infrastructure.
Yeah, and
there's no way to. There's no funding.
I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how you make a film in Addis Ababa. I don't know, because there's so many. It's not just the technical aspects, the funding, and all that, but. Filmmaking is, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never had to do it, but a lot of it is about scheduling. A lot of it is about, directing is you're directing other people. You're supervising other artists and other technical people and providing a direction. How do you do that in a country where, as we started off in this conversation, people are so unreliable, people don't show up on time. One person doesn't do what they do. One person, one thing doesn't go according to the schedule and everything is thrown off. So.
Yeah. So when it comes to filmmaking, it's all about choosing the right people. Yeah. And if you have like a strong production manager, a strong producer, then they'll make sure to have everything on schedule. That's one. The second thing about this is everybody on set is an artist technically. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And it's not easy being an artist. You have to go through a lot of hurdles. So they somewhat fought to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because your parents don't agree with it. Society looks at you funny just because you want to be an artist and everything.
It's also there's technical difficulty in being any kind of artist. It's not just the creativity. Exactly. As much technical difficulty, not more than people who do just technical stuff. Right? Yeah.
So once you go through all those hurdles, it means you really want to do this. You really want to be there. Yeah. You know, so you're not going to take it lightly. So I try and choose people that are serious about their craft. Yeah. And that's how I go about it. But, you know, sometimes it happens. An actor doesn't show up, the lights don't come on time.
Electricity
cuts, yeah.
I mean there's a lot of challenges. Like 1,000 things that can go wrong, and I always find in Addis, and maybe this is just my own mentality about things, but everything that can go wrong will, and more. Like stuff that you couldn't imagine could go wrong, people will find a way to mess things up.
Murphy's Law.
So it's more than Murphy's Law. Though. That's everything that can go wrong will, and then some other stuff that you could never imagine going wrong will. So I kudos to anybody who can manage people like that and handle schedules. And there are people making films in Ethiopia. I don't exactly know how they pull it off, and probably a lot of delays and this and that. But it is.
It's hard.
Oh, it's super
hard.
Like it,
but it's rewarding. Like seeing the finished product. You know, that's the only reward you have. Yeah. Yeah. More than anything.
Yeah. What about Shifta or something like that? Like getting to see the community, because there's events, there's a community, people who hang out there. There's kind of a certain vibe out there. Like
Shifta it's become its own thing. I really love it. So we're trying to do more and more events, trying to support the art community in any way we can, from painters to musicians to now we started doing stand-up comedy. So we're trying to develop this thing with stand-up comedians so they can have a platform where they can like showcase their talent. And we're working with Arts TV now, so they're gonna capture all the events and then broadcast it on their show. So mainly the Shifta concerts and the comedy nights is going to be aired on Arts TV. I think it's going to create that culture and
draw people who are talented.
Exactly.
And then it just becomes a vicious cycle in a good way.
Yeah.
I that's another thing I'm fascinated about. Just like for the longest time, it was rappers. Right? Is when are we going to get a first Amharic rapper? Liz Miguel broke the door open.
Yeah.
Right? For a long time in the States, everybody had the same idea that they failed to execute, which was fast food. Like all the diaspora were talking about doing Ethiopian fast food, like injera rolls and like a cart, kitfo sandwich. Everybody talked about doing it, and nobody pulled it off because the costs and also
the spices
like,
and
the
stuff.
spices,
it's hard to get,
food belashal, like you can't have it in a cart. It's not. It just doesn't quite work. If people did do the sandwich thing or whatever, it was always in the context of a Ethiopian restaurant. But everybody had the same idea of doing like the Ethiopian McDonald's. And then the third thing that I always was intrigued by is, when are we going to get a good stand-up comedian? Because I've seen people try to do Jay Leno on ETV. I don't know who the people are who've done it, but it doesn't quite work, right? And the audience is for, like, it's not our thing. It hasn't quite happened, but do you know if anyone stands out as far as Shifta? Like, have you seen really talented people?
Yeah. The last comedy night we did, 2 or 3 of them were really good. Especially one guy, he was cracking everybody up. Yeah, I think he has potential. He's gonna go places.
Okay. Do you want to say his name? Do you know his name?
Dave Olala is the one that really stood out, and everybody was cracking up with his jokes. But all the other cats, they were really good.
A lot of good people.
Yeah.
That's important too, because I've also seen bad stand-up.
Yeah,
in New York, I mean, I've gone to a lot of amateur nights where part of the fun is that you end up poking a little, but it's also hard to watch. When somebody goes up there, and I think stand-up comedy is the greatest and the purest art form that exists. Because what is stand-up comedy? It's a person gets up in front of a crowd with nothing more than a microphone, maybe some props, but that's usually not, and just talks. It's the simplest form of communication, the simplest form of performance art. They write it themselves, they go up, they perform it, and obviously it's incredibly frightening. It's incredibly difficult. But what's amazing is it's so simple, and there's two opposite reactions that most people fall. Some people get the tepid applause. Oh, okay, that was okay. But it's usually two things. One is you see the reaction on a person's face when they're laughing. Like laughter is an incredible thing. Right? It's like you're taken over by this. You can't pretend to laugh. By the way, this is why we're talking about filmmaking and stand-up comedy. There are no good films about stand-up comedians. It's never been done because you have to have scenes in there where the audience is faking laughter. And the guy's faking making them laugh, and it never works. You can't imagine a film where someone is pretending to do stand-up comedy, and all people are pretending to laugh. It doesn't work, right? It has to be a natural, subconscious kind of thing. So the idea of, a stand-up comedian in Ethiopia is such an interesting thing because. There's two reactions that people have to stand-up comedy. One is, oh my God, they're just exhilarated. They're laughing uncontrollably. And then the other is you see when somebody fails, like the pained grimace, the anger that comes out. So it doesn't even make sense to be angry at somebody because they didn't make you laugh.
Yeah.
But people just like, oh my God, and it's these two extremes, and all it is somebody getting up on stage and talking.
Yeah. But stand-up comedy in Ethiopia is. Back in the days, there were some really good comedians, like Tasway Kasa. Tasway Kasa.
You're talking about Ababa Tasway?
No. Ababa Tasway was good too.
He was. Was not much different from a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. No, Tasway Kasa was on another level. He was one of the funniest comedians ever.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Yeah. So you speak Amharic.
I do.
So you should look up his stuff on YouTube.
They got it?
I think they have.
What era is this?
90s.
Okay.
90s. He was super funny. No dirty jokes, no nothing. Just everyday stuff. He would do voices of old my mom and Amin, and then.
See, I missed out on this.
Yeah, he was super funny.
Yeah.
And then there was they used to do little skits for TV. But they also did some live performances like stand-up comedy and then reenactments and stuff like that. It was Alabacho, and the other guy that went crazy was Lemene Alabacho. Their stuff.
I like that name.
Oh my God, yeah. He stood around. He went, I don't know if he went crazy or something. But Alabacho died. He used to have a TV show on ETV called Alabisho. He was the first late-night type format show that
I think I
that
saw
did
it.
Yeah. So there were a few comedians that really.
There was. I remember about 20 years. Maybe when I was in college, maybe 15 years ago. There was this guy Tom Mine, who had done that video where he's interviewing Mellas and he's interviewing Mengistu, and it was like a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. He was doing what The Daily Show does, which is you take some video, you take it in. Yeah. I didn't think that was funny at all. Yeah. And it's because I had seen that technique. Most people who had been in the States had seen that technique 100 times before. Done a little bit better, the production values, if not the comedy. Right? So to me, it was, but to people here, nobody had seen somebody doing that and taking, Mengistu and doing like political comedy and making it not political, but just like goofing around about said something about homosexuals or something like that. So the fact that it was, comedy is all about surprise. It's all about incongruity, something that doesn't fit or that you don't expect coming. If you've seen something like that 100 times, so maybe for me, that's why.
But I'm sure everybody else here loved it.
Yeah, a lot of people loved that.
I know.
A lot of people were talking about that,
I know.
that video.
I know.
I hope it's funny because we're talking about television formats. I was having this conversation with somebody who comes on here as well yesterday. Meaty TV. A lot of people refer back to Meaty TV. You've seen Meaty TV?
Yeah, it was a show back in the day, late nights, where they would invite different people and have a chat with them.
What's the guy's name? I forget his name.
I forgot.
Yeah, he was an older fellow, well known. I apologize. I don't mean to be disrespectful. He's a very, very talented guy.
Yeah.
I used to watch Meaty TV as well because back in the day it was only ETV for a while. There was a period there when the new government came in where they hadn't quite made satellite dishes legal yet.
Yeah.
There's a few years there that I remember where everybody just watched ETV. And then everything just kind of changed over. There was like the Channel O era. There was was the Africa channel or
yes,
something.
TV,
Yeah,
then
then
TV Africa.
TV Africa.
Yeah. TV Africa was nice.
Yeah. Then for a while before everybody got to SCV, there was Arabsat was, and still now. You know. But anyway, Meet ETV at the end of the night. I always thought was really interesting because it's very intelligent. It's like an intelligent interview show, but it's entertaining as well as being intelligent. Like, it was a well-produced show. And only recently did I find out, like, they were clearly, again, I don't mean this disrespectfully, there's nothing wrong with imitating something that works, but it was clearly an imitation of a show that was a breakthrough in American television called Tomorrow, The Tomorrow Show by Tom Snyder. Because what they realized is people who watch TV all day long are watching, like, people in the studios jumping up and down, Price is Right, this and that, up until late night. And they were like, by the end of the night, right before you go to sleep, it's called Tomorrow Show because it's past midnight. It's the last show on television. You're tired of seeing all that. And you're ready to see something a little more intelligent. If you're staying up, you might be a college student or might be somebody who doesn't have a 9 to 5 and is not trying to relax, and just watch something dumb. Maybe somebody who's a little edgy, right? So it was late night, basically the next day, post midnight, and black background, 2 people, an interview, but edgy enough kind of material that it was serious but also entertaining, and it could be seen as entertainment. And there's somebody else who, who Charlie Rose is? So Charlie Rose, very well-known interviewer guy who interviews, if you see a really good writer, a really good filmmaker, a really good, he interviewed Jay-Z a bunch of times. Jay-Z has some of his best interviews are with Charlie Rose for whatever it is. Some old white guy and Jay-Z always, but always gets really good stuff and really good people. And it's the same thing, black background, direct conversation, intelligent, but so interesting and so intelligent that it's still entertaining. That's Meet TV, right? It's the same format, and it worked. It worked here too.
So. My dad used to love Meet TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never missed an episode.
Yeah. So we've gone through quite a bit. Is there anything else you want to throw in? Anything that's happening now that you want to discuss, or should we wrap up?
Not really. Just we're trying to do a lot. Come through the Shifta. Try and check us out if you haven't already. Good food, good vibes, and look out for us on our social media, Shifta Foods, on Instagram or Facebook. Other than that, check out our record label. We have some dope music, dope artists, dope content coming. Mido Records. And that's it. Sounds great. Well, thanks so much for taking time. I know you're very busy, man, obviously. So please come back anytime you can. And hopefully Faven will come through as well and offer us her background. She spent a lot of time in the diaspora in D.C. and is quite knowledgeable about any number of things. Definitely. So thanks a lot for coming by, and we hope to have you again soon. Anytime. All right. You've been listening to Ras Temari Radio, Offense Necessary, where we discuss